they get scot-free, keep their jobs and holding big positions in government. And to what you say, there's a passage in the article that says Kenya wants to explore UK's unexplained wealth legislation to recover money. The money runs into billions and we hope we will be successful. The legislation offers an effective means to recoup illegitimate funds. That's just what you have said, Ms. Mudibo. Now, also on that page, that is page 6 of the Standard, we're having another story on the war on drugs, which is also related with this sort of collaboration with foreign agencies. We're told MPs tighten the noose on drug lords in law changes. Is this where to start when you're fighting the war, where you're fighting drugs? And we're having the Nyali MP Muhammad Ali being quoted as saying, those destroying our children are the rich who walk our streets without taking advantage of ineffective law. I'll start with you, Ms. Mudibo, being a lawyer.
If you look at the Narcotics Act, it's one of those acts that has got very heavy, very punitive provisions. You remember the recent case of the woman in Nyeri?
Yes.
Okay, she was a repeat offender.
Yeah,
but the sentencing was actually well within the law. Yeah. It's not something that should surprise anybody. But it is still shocking. So that tells you that it's not the way the law is crafted that is the problem. It's the approach that is the problem. When you look at that Narcotics Act, if somebody finds me with msokotombili, zabangi, that is something that I could potentially go to jail for even 10 years for.
Right.
Or the fine of like $1 million bob. It's like absolutely ridiculous. So most of the time you find people would rather engage in corruption to evade narcotics charges than wait for it to fall in your laps.
Okay.
And the problem has been the ones who are the drug lords, the kingpins, are so shadowy that the people who are always being netted are the guys who are the small fish in the game.
Petty offenders.
It's the guy at the end, the one who's actually selling them sokoto moja. But the guy who's making sure that it is cultivated, it is brought into the country, it is packaged into little pieces, it is distributed. Those guys are so shadowy, they've never been effectively arraigned in court. But the other thing that we have also noticed, and this is conjecture, I cannot be cross-examined on this, is that many of them have learned how to access power. We've been talking about business influencing power. And people who are able to use the narcotics proceeds to sponsor candidates into political office, for example, or to sponsor or to make the lives of OCSs and OCPDs comfortable, such that even though they are known drug lords, for example, you see with the case of the Akashas, they were well-known drug lords, but for some reason, the judicial system, the police, everybody treated them with kid gloves until it took the Americans to say, you know what, enough of these games, back into a jurisdiction, we'll deal with it there. And there it was a matter of 1 year, the matter was. So there is merit in what Mohammed is saying, but at the same time, the way the law is crafted, it is too heavy on the little person and not as effective on the real kingpins behind this trade.
Because I would imagine if the little people are always being arrested, they could always find somebody else to
exactly. It doesn't disrupt this.
It doesn't exactly what happens.
Exactly.
And you know, one of the things that Kenya should learn from, and I don't know why we just don't pick up a book and read. If you look at the American war on corruption, not on corruption, on drugs, it is the biggest failure in American history. It has had marked increase in drug use. It has had more people die from drug abuse. And then 3, it has had very petty criminals fill the American jail system. On the other side of the pond, in Canada, in the Netherlands, where they have more lax laws on the end user, more lax laws on the small peddler, and they focus on the big criminal, they've had more effective results. And number 2, the way to stop someone using drugs is not to take them to prison. Prison is full of drugs. The way to get someone to stop using drugs is to provide an environment where they can easily be accessed and easily be helped. Access to clean needles, access to healthcare, access to those things has actually led to places like Canada and the Netherlands seeing a reduction in drug use, because the worse the conditions are for a drug user, the more likely they are to continue to do it. Because the whole point of using drugs is emotional distress. So you cannot put this person in emotional distress and expect that they will change. So there's this very primary school approach to laws in this country that does not make sense. I would very much rather hear them talking about that because of the HIV prevalence in heroin addicts, let's provide them with needles, you know, and that's what's supposed to happen. And I know Christians are about to get up and complain. Let me tell them, stop being a Pharisee, be like Jesus. It's very easy. Help those who are in sin, help them, because if that person can access a clean needle, then you are sure of one thing completely, that they will live one more day to change their lives. If you don't give them that needle and they catch HIV, if you don't give them a safe space and they die, then what's going to happen? I have friends who've recovered from drug use, and I'll tell you for free that when they recovered from that drug use, they recovered because there was an environment enabling them to overcome the emotional distress they were in that led them to drug use in the first place. So our MPs, please, Yani, pick up a book, read about Canada, read about the United States, read about the effects of the war against drugs in the United States and how it has not worked, how it has led to gangs, and then come back to the drawing board and protect the end user and go for the big fish. How many more acacias are left in this country?
Right.
And then finally, Parliament has a law where you have immunity on the floor of the House.
Okay.
So this idea of coming to say there are pharmacists in this country without naming them in Parliament is cowardice.
Yes.
So our parliamentarians should be there naming and shaming and making sure that the public eye is on these people. Stop calling people pharmacists, call them what they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to know who they are, and before we even start talking about the laws and what have you, we need to be open about it. Now, joining us for the conversation is Nerima Wako, Director of Siasa Place. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We are on page 3 of the Standard, and we are page 6 of the Standard, and we're talking about the war on graft, and we are on drugs, and there is an article here that says MPs will tighten the loose on drug laws in law changes, and we have quoted Nyali MP Muhammad Ali as saying those destroying our children are the rich who walk our streets taking advantage of ineffective laws. What do you think about that?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to the show this morning. I think that youth do suffer a lot from drugs, and it's because of the lack of employment. But also, as we talk about putting stricter laws and regulations for them, we're not solving the issue of unemployment. I think it was Kivuda Kibwana who recently I was with him, and he was speaking about how there was a young man who had approached him and in Makweni after a church service, and he was actually shaking from withdrawal. And he was saying that at the time, it was when the president had made very strict regulations in Nyeri, so there was not a lot of alcohol and things like that. And so he was shaking and trembling, and he came to the governor and he said to him, I actually realized I have a family. Because he was living in this bubble, in this world where he wanted to escape.
Basically a haze, drug-fueled haze,
And so now, as much as now he's aware of what's happening around him, he's still unemployed. He still cannot provide for his family. He's still frustrated. So the questions are, as much as I am all for reducing the amount of drugs that is circulating. And I've even witnessed in Uganda, they've actually now illegalized the sachets because of alcohol. But as much as we're doing that, what are we doing for these young people to make sure that they are not going to go through even more far worse depression or withdrawal symptoms? What are we doing to make sure that they're using their time to be able to be productive in this country?
And basically, drug use, like Mark said, is a form of escapism. So if you're escaping this problem and you're taking off the drugs, and now you're having to face your realities, you're facing the same problems that may have drawn you back, taking it into drug abuse. Now we have.
Before you leave that topic, may I just mention the cost of rehabilitation in this country?
Absolutely.
You know, the problem with people who've never dealt with drug users is you think just stop. It's actually a medical condition that requires a lot of medical care for someone to overcome. But you go, and the cheapest ones are 3,000 shillings a day, 4,000 shillings a day. So you tell me, is the person who can't afford 50 bob worth of changa in a day, how are they going to get 3,000 shillings? So again, the lawmakers need to tell us how many government institutions exist to rehabilitate these people. That young man who was shaking in front of Kivuta Kibwana, was Kivuta Kibwana going to take him?
That's
a key question.
And maybe he might do something for the young man, but what about the rest?